Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about burnout, and particularly HRV, what that can tell you about burnout, as well as unlocking human potential through regenerative business and energetic literacy. And today's guest is none other than Jessica Corbin, and she has got an incredible track record. I'm just going to highlight some of the things in here. She's the founder and CEO of Source. Jessica is dedicated to regenerating human energy, accelerating organizational consciousness, and architecting a vital and sustainable future. Recently named by the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center as one of their milestone makers and brought into Startup Health's portfolio of companies, Source is solving the $300 billion problem of stress and burnout through data-driven plus human-centered technologies. Jessica has also appeared as a feature correspondent for mainstream TV networks and programs such as CNN, ABC's The View, E! Entertainment, Tech TV, The Style Network, and The Science Channel. She's also been a host of Discovery Science Channel's Wired Next Fest. She's a panel guest for ABC's The View, panel guest for CNN's American Morning, panel guest for CNN's Larry King Live, one of my personal favorite interviewers, and panel guest for Fox Sports' Best Damn Sports Show, period. Honors and awards include the 1995 All-American Cross Country Runner, 1996 Olympic Torch Escort, 1998 UCLA Track and Cross Country Scholar Athlete, and she joins us today from Marina Del Rey, California, just down the street. Welcome to the show.
You read the full thing. I mean, you got the extended version in there. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you know, it's amazing. And what's fascinating here is it seems that your career of excellence started in athletics. Would that be accurate?
100%.
How would you? Yeah. So before we get into all the other stuff, because I love athletes, it's my passion. I really think that all the core lessons in life can be learned on an athletic field far better than a classroom. And if you look at the track record of people who have a strong athletic background, they do very well in life. What got you into athletics? And how did that translate into your success? And then maybe how that led into what you're doing today.
Okay, so what's really funny is that I had a dear friend ask me this past weekend, my first experience of being creative. It was a really juicy question. It was my first experience of creativity. And the memory that burst forward was I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And I'm in my backyard of my grandparents' place, and we're making an obstacle course. That's my first experience of creativity. And I know people wouldn't pair those two things together, but as an athlete, my expression through my body felt like a highly creative act. And I loved the experience of my power and my strength and my agility, my ability to progress, in something that I was endeavoring toward. I had a really early touch point in athletics. But funny enough, I chose probably one of the most brutal sports that you could choose because I was really after a friendship. I wanted to be friends with this one girl named Nina Lennon, and she was going out for the cross country team. And I was like, I'll just tag along. And I ended up being really good. And she ended up leaving the team. I stayed. Eventually, I became, an All-American cross country athlete, top 50 in the nation in high school, and then was recruited, went to UCLA. But it really did set the stage for my work ethic, my ability to have confidence in achieving anything that I put my mind to. But it also set the stage for deep, deep, deep learning around how your willpower needs to be aligned, I would say, with right action and principles. Otherwise, you can create a really sticky situation for yourself. And which is why it's no surprise to me now that my core work and my service is around burnout, because when the will starts to override certain pieces of information that your body is trying to give you, it is a big invitation to pause and go in. And I didn't know how to do that until I had, given myself adrenal fatigue before the age of 30. So a lot of will, a lot of ambition, providing me good things for an acute period of time. When that goes unchecked, it can really devolve your life. And it did for me. And so this is all about the course correct now.
I love that. And as an insightful point, I was about, what was it now? 8 or 9 days ago, I was at a VIP event with Dr. Jordan Peterson. And of course, for those who don't know, he's a very controversial psychologist from Canada that predicted the downfall of the Canadian situation, which is in dire straits. The country is in dire straits under the current administration. And he says there's a couple things that correlates to this. And I want to go into this as we start talking about burnout. And I think burnout is actually a precursor to something even worse. And how do we get to that? And then what are the remedies? So one of the things that he came to public prominence was when he said, look, the government's creating compelled speech. And I don't mind going by these various pronouns and things that he goes, if that's what somebody's requested, but I have a real problem with someone outside of me dictating something that is not, like, the government is not supposed to compel speech, because if you look at the history, we end up in tyranny. And then, so that's been in my mind, and watching that as being a former Canadian and seeing that happen and seeing what's playing out in the world and now the current stuff that's happening. But at that event, he said, tyrannical regimes happen and are the death of millions of people when everyone stops telling the truth.
Yes.
Telling the truth is a lot more difficult than people might think, because burnout is, in my opinion, is the variance between what I'm aligned with internally versus what I'm compromising in order to mitigate. So maybe I'm compromising my family life. Maybe I'm compromising my health. Maybe I'm compromising my integrity. On some level, the lie is not in alignment with my intentions. And this is disruptive inside the biological system. So he's giving a psychological overview from a society standpoint. He's doing it as a clinician because he talks about the subconscious dynamics that lead to disease and to breakdown and to dysfunction. And, David Hawkins talked about that all diseases comes from unconscious guilt. All burnout comes from a misalignment of values. In other words, you're deploying the energy of your biology to something in a misaligned way. So take us to that moment when you realized burnout for you, and how did that, How did that manifest for you as a conceptual, physiological, emotional, spiritual aspect? Because to me, it's a misalignment of energies.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am that we so quickly got to this topic of telling the truth, how critical this is for the relief of this systemic and global epidemic.
Yes.
The what we are teaching at Source is called energetic literacy, which is this ability to basically read your own information and then how that ripples out into your relationships and the work that you do in the world. People are so disembodied, and I can go into the history of why this is the case. A lot of it has to do with the mechanistic age that really set a certain tone, and there's an importance for every age. But the mechanistic age, which was born, of course, in the industrial age, it was all about creating efficiencies. And eventually what this ends up doing is it creates a highly left-brained approach to living. And this then silos a person from their interior. So you were saying something about how when a person's internal truth is not in alignment with their external actions, they then are creating what's called a friction within themselves, because there isn't this integrated approach. And truly what's happening, like if we want to talk about the meta of why the human energy crisis exists, it is because of, I would say, 2 points: a disconnection between inner and outer, and a disconnection between right brain and left brain. Literally, people are walking, or I would say not just walking around, but they're making highly impactful business decisions and not bringing their whole selves to the table to make those decisions. And so it's making this world a bit of a flat land. When you bring back the right brain, which is your energetic and emotional material, your creativity, your intuition, when we kind of weave that back into decision making, validate that part of ourselves as being as needed as the logical rational, then this world starts to become more magical again and more whole again. But we have to go through a very significant and real paradigm shift from this mechanistic age into what I have learned and what many people call the living system paradigm, where there is ebb and flow. It is adaptive and responsive. It's diverse and inclusive, and it's energetically literate. And you can imagine organizations, because we serve individuals, teams, organizations. The dimension of energy has never been visualized. It's never been acknowledged as being like a thing that has just felt woo-woo. When people talk about energy, it feels so woo-woo because it's invisible. But when you start to identify that we can visualize energy, when you start to really understand the component of heart rate variability, and you can take this data in aggregate and start to look at individuals, teams, companies, populations, and we can see ebb and flow, where load is happening and where latent potential is. It's all there. We can see now in a way that will provide, I think, our world's greatest future-proof leaders to really make sound decisions to get upstream on all of the fallout associated, with not living true. So I could go on and on and on about it, but those are some broad strokes. My personal story is a whole nother thing that I'm happy to talk about, but I didn't want to miss the moment to really tell people, give people, I think, an experience of where we're at in space and time on the higher level. And it is quite an awakening. And you're a part of it, Wade. Oh my God. I mean, it's written all in you and your DNA, like you're living it, you're standing forward in it. And it's incredibly life affirming to see.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I want to talk about the truth element, because what you're essentially stating, and so if we look at a tyrannical regime. And we're going to look at, so I see the human body. I see myself as a single cell through the human body throughout all of time. There's 10,000 generations before me, 10,000 generations after me. The right decisions I make are going to increase the likelihood of putting genes out into the future or thought paradigms. And the other side of it is, suboptimal for my future generation. So, even if one's single and not with anybody and is pursuing some sort of path in life that's outside of family life, you're embracing a collective frequency of thought that originated somewhere long before you and will continue on long after you're here. So we're embodying that in our body, a frequency of awareness, of consciousness, of direction, of intention, and ideally, like people are displayed, like cells in the body of, you have a liver cell, a brain cell, a immune system cell. All of them have different forms and functions, and all are part of the collective whole of humanity. And if we can adopt this mentality, we would solve a large amount of the problems of conflict, because we're seeing that we're in opposition of the goals. And then that's being fueled by the efficiency of mathematical algorithms. So mathematical algorithms, which are very logic-based derivatives, are putting people into hyper states of stress. So if we look at the effects of social media, for example, on children, and the sheer amount of data and information that we're receiving, and in a formative stage about who am I and what am I, and am I in alignment? And, as a young person, oftentimes we're finding what is in alignment with our purpose, yet we're being bombarded with a comparison analysis. Well, how can I possibly be like so-and-so if I'm just, and I think that's really suboptimal for the psyche. But HRV, and I would like you to unpack this particularly, because what HRV is essentially is it's like the truth number, the truth mechanism between the integration between your ideals versus what you're actually doing. And you could say that left brain, right brain, you could say it's in alignment with me, out of alignment. I'm overstressed, I'm over competing, I'm pushing too hard, I'm not pushing enough and feeling anxiety about it. All of that is going to essentially come out in your HRV numbers, if I'm correct. So before we go too deep into HRV, I always want to tie the personal story as to why HRV became important to you. Like, what led to you to come to this? Because everybody that gets to the truth, usually because at some point they were in opposition to it and couldn't take it any further. In other words, like, complete collapse would happen.
Yes. So first off, I just want to affirm HRV is a truth teller. That's why I love it so much. Because when I didn't know how to tell the truth, it did. And I just wanted to really.
That's an important point, because how many people, going back to energetic intelligence here, have a data point, if you will, that tells if you're telling the truth about what you should be doing or what you shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
Nobody.
It is something that I feel has kept me so safe and in integrity. And it really helps to decondition a lot of your patterns once you learn to trust the wisdom within. Right. My personal story was one that I think many people can relate to, with some exceptional details. So I was a young athlete. I had a lot of ambition. For those that follow astrology, I'm a triple fire. So all first three of my 5 signs are like fire, fire, fire. And I really—
Is that Vedic or Western?
That is Western.
Okay. Okay.
And I had a lot of support to go for what I wanted in my family unit. And so I did. And as you already read, I achieved great things. I got into the college of choice, but there was also an underbelly happening during that time where at the age of 16, I had my first ulcer. I was getting cortisone shots in my hips so I could compete. I was getting constantly sick. a lot of bronchitis was happening and some low-grade undiagnosed like autoimmune issues. But again, that willpower was like super strong. So I was able to override all of it. And by the time that I was like a sophomore in college, I wasn't getting my period. I was having a hard time, like having like consistent bowel movements, TMI, but it's just true. It was just like everything in me was kind of fried. And yet I knew no other way. I started to set my sights on my career where I was a reporter, and then I got represented by William Morris Agency and started to do the reporter, TV host, producer game. And then there was a significant life event where my brother Ryan, he fell 4 stories to concrete, and he was in a coma for 4.5 months, emerging from that coma for 1.5 years. And it was a completely leveling experience for myself and my family. As you can imagine, we held a bedside vigil around his bedside for 1.5 years, meaning there was a family member around him at all times. I quit my job. I moved home, and I was also in a family that had, I would say, a fair amount of evangelical Christian beliefs. And I was at the time in my young 20s. And we were on the Larry King live show, and they were asking us about the power of prayer. Oh, I should go back. It's because my grandfather is an old Hollywood singer. And so it was a high profile thing. It got a lot of media attention, my brother being in this coma, this call for prayer. And it was all too much for my mind to hold. And I disembodied myself, I'm sure. I'm sure I was just like out of the building for a while. But when I started to crawl back in, because my adrenals by this point in time are just getting so low and depleted, I can't sleep. I can't find that sense of peace anywhere. Not only is my brother gone and my family is completely unraveling, I'm having a crisis of faith. I don't believe as my family traditionally believed. I don't know what to believe. And so all of this was happening. And where I went was 2 places. My yoga mat, I hit it hard. I hit it often. And acupuncture. And so my yoga practice really started to reveal quite a bit of what was misaligned. I started to identify that there was a thread I could follow inside that led me to people, places, things that were reconciling what was unreconciled. There was something inside that I could follow. And it was just a feeling, like a resonance, like a gong, boom, boom. And I started to almost use my body like a tuning fork. And I would cross-check everything against it. Instead of, again, being of the mind, everything was like energetic. And I would check out every assumption or potential with my system. I would kind of lay it on the altar of my body, and I could feel more and more and more. And the acupuncture side, what was happening there was they could put my body by playing with my vagus nerve, right? They could get me in that state of peace. And they would tell me things about my chi by doing the 3-finger pulse. And they would say, oh, your chi is really strong today. You can do yin yoga. Or your chi is really your chi is really strong today. You can run hard. Or your chi is really wiry today. You need to do yin yoga. And that was when my light bulb moment hit. As a reporter, I had covered technology. I was talking to all of these innovators. And I needed a piece of technology that was doing what this acupuncturist was doing for me every single day. Because if I knew how to dose my body with movement medicine, and I wouldn't have gotten myself into the predicament that I think that I did. And so that's when I set off. I drained my 401k. I started to look up how I could get this product made. I looked into heart math, and HRV really seemed like the biomarker that I wanted to track. And I partnered with a gentleman that was, I convinced him, he was a VP of electronics at Philips. He had studied more about HRV at the time. This is back in 2012 than anybody I'd met. and we got our first product to market, and it's just been iterating from there. And that's the story. That's how I get here, is a complete meltdown crisis, really understanding that God is within, and I just needed to feel into that frequency and be courageous enough to move from that frequency with a lot more courage.
I think everyone who has engaged in the pursuit of excellence, athletics, business, family life, spiritual life, whatever, will ultimately end up with the classic Joseph Campbell moment where the dragon comes to the village and burns the village down, because there's an ego identity that has to be consumed within that. And the calamities of one's life are actually a call to adventure. They're a call to an inner discovery, and you have to go out and take that journey. That is the essence of the hero's journey, which permeates all cultures. I had the opportunity have you ever heard of the book The Wizard of Us? Jean Houston. So she was a contemporary of Joseph Campbell. And what was very interesting, I saw her at an event in Sedona a number of years ago. She was probably the most profound speaker I've ever seen. And The Wizard of Us was a rendition about the hero's journey from a feminine perspective as expressed in The Wizard of Oz. Because if you look at The Wizard of Oz, it was a unique take on the hero's adventure, which it was using feminine qualities of Dorothy, who wanted to help her friends. And even when she destroys the witch, she's just trying to put the fire out of the Scarecrow. And that whole component. But she talks about this in a really beautiful concept, because it's essentially integrating the feminine characteristics and values in the hero's journey. Most hero's journeys are the swashbuckling, blood at the end of my sword, standing on the hill with, the whatever hero kills that happened, the guys that gave their lives for the cause, and they emerged, and you're somewhat damaged, and you come back to your village and you take those lessons and that pass it on to the next person. Where in this version, it was a different version. And if we look at order versus chaos, feminine versus masculine, and the ensuing crisis that we're experiencing in a hyper-technologicalized world, it is actually the lack of integration with the feminine aspects of intuition and awareness and sense of self. And part of that, I do believe, is because of the opportunities presented to women since the 60s and birth control and stuff, that, we have so many women entering into the place, but they're entering in a masculine form as opposed to a feminine form. And I think that's where we didn't quite, I don't know how many generations it's going to take to kind of find the rebalance again. I'm all for opportunities, but not understanding, what was more efficient than the Nazi regime, very efficient, right? Not good. And yet, if I go to your local goddess circle, not something that's going to help me make decisions in my business today. So I'm using those two polarities, right? Of like, okay, we've got to find a happy middle here of integrating both the masculine and feminine inside ourselves, these intuitive awareness things. And what was ironic in my bodybuilding career, I was taught by my coach to become vigilant of what I was feeling and report that back. We called it, at those days, biofeedback. I didn't know HRV, didn't know anything about it or whatever, but I had to start making observations about how I felt, what my energy level was, paying attention to that. And I coached it in years, and it became something that I developed culturally within my company. How's everybody doing? What's everybody feeling? What are you stressed about? What are we have these check-ins that helps us build our company culture. Can you explain to people HRV as the truth metric about how well you're living as an integrated human?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Great question, because there's so many components that go into a person. And let me first start by saying I would even say what's an important concept for people to understand even before heart rate variability is a concept called allostatic load, which is the cumulative wear and tear that the body endures, resulting in physiological dysregulation. So HRV is like a measurement of allostatic load.
Oh, that's beautiful. I haven't heard that put before anywhere. No one's ever said that to me before. That's great.
So when it comes to allostatic load, you have to look at—
What is it? Can you define allostatic load? I'm not familiar with it.
It's the cumulative wear and tear
on
the body-mind vehicle and the resulting dysregulation that happens.
Okay.
Yeah. And so HRV can be used or is used to measure allostatic load. When it comes to a person, they have so many facets. Their personality is one. Their bioindividuality is another big one. And let's just use those two subjective and objective factors. Everybody responds to stress differently. Things like, in addition to age and early childhood development, all of this goes into how people process stress. Okay. So again, personality, bioindividuality, early childhood development, age, alcohol, all these things kind of are big determinants of people's ability to handle challenge and demand. And so I really love HRV. It's super agnostic. It's, again, just saying, listen, relative, and how we use HRV at Source and how I think personally everybody should use it is because of this, I'd say, bioindividuality. It's very important that people don't compare themselves to each other. This only is valid when you're using it to compare you to you over time.
This is a huge fact. Okay, great. I want to just hold on this for a second for our listeners, because it's kind of— excellence is this thing that we're standard for, and we celebrate professional athletes, we celebrate professional musicians, we celebrate the top, executives of the world, the greatest, the best, the ever. But none of those people got there. They weren't always there. They had to take a progressive state of evolution in that. And it seems cliche to a lot of people to say, well, just compare yourself against yourself. But really, if you're not doing that, your focus is too diffuse. In other words, number one, you're not in alignment with what your ultimate potential is. It doesn't matter how much I check in with myself. I'm never going to play center in the NBA. Like, genetically, it's not happening. It's not going to happen. It'd be great. It'd be awesome. But I could train as hard as I want. I could have the best coaches in the world. I could put all the money into it. It's not going to happen. And I'm going to feel a certain amount of stress about that. Now, that being said, maybe I'm completely delusional. I'm a Don Quixote of NBA lore, and I decide that I'm going to go down that route. And I'm totally happy, chasing the illusionary because it's fun and enjoyable. If I'm self-regulating through that, maybe that's an okay adventure. But generally but in today's world, like we used to live in little communities of 150 people that you knew forever, and you could kind of see where you are. And there's a serotonin response mechanism inside the body that says where I am on the pecking order, and I correct within that. But now, if whatever age I am, I can walk into a room or inside of a community or whatever, and depending on how I refer that, I could feel myself as a legend or a loser. You know what I mean? And it's either one of those is not an appropriate evaluation. So
yeah, what we're looking at is the isness.
Yes.
HRV
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The isness.
Yes. The isness. We often say at our company, the isness is the business. Okay.
I love it. It's a great.
Because to me, this isn't about comparison. Again, we really need to understand kind of this mechanism that we are in. And this life is about self-discovery. And what you will discover is that for certain periods of time, there's going to be certain, let's say, habits and patterns that you can run that are going to bring you like a lot of fruit. And then it's just going to stop working because your life is actually asking for something else, for you to grow in another capacity, in another way. And so what HRV is looking at ultimately is the physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, relational aspects of you. And it's so elegant, and it's so it distills all of these dimensions of you down to a single data point. Now, the thing is that when you take your HRV score, and with Source, it's a 1-minute assessment that you take first thing in the morning, and there's no hardware required. Okay. It's just finger to camera. And we've chosen to go this route because we really want to scale, and people don't want to wear another thing, is what we found out in the market. And so finger to camera, first thing in the morning, you habituate it into the morning routine. It's your 1-minute meditation. And then we're going to be able to understand, again, how yesterday, last week has imprinted upon you. And then there's an invitation, again, for greater inquiry about where the load is coming from. Is this because you ran 12 miles yesterday? Is this because you had a really, really difficult conversation with your wife? Is this because you did extra breath work? Is this because you changed something in your diet? What I find fascinating, and what I find actually really life affirming, is the ability to run experiments so that you can know what is actually working for you now, which might be different than what was working for you 10 years ago. And with the platform that we've created, any practitioner, any health practitioner can use this platform to run their protocols, test their protocols to see what really moves the needle for people, for their customers, because for me, we're in a community here where there are so many incredibly talented practitioners, healers, but not everybody has the ability to do, clinical research around it. But with this platform, you're going to be able to run your own experiments to see what actually is moving the needle for you as maybe an individual, in addition to the clients that you serve. So now you can get objective proof points around it. There doesn't have to be confusion about, is this soft or is this objective? You can actually know now very, very easily. So that's why HRV, period. HRV is the standard in health, period. And if you aren't taking your HRV, I just couldn't recommend it enough, because it's been in cardiac medicine for over 60 years. There's over 500,000 citations in medicine around it. And it is the key indicator of health, well-being, performance. It's the leading indicator, meaning if and when you start to enter a stage, I would say, of overreaching or friction, or let's say pre-burnout, it's going to show up in your data. You're going to be able to get upstream on these things so much more quickly now than you ever were before. And it helps you stay in what we call energetic integrity, this ability to deeply listen to your body's wisdom and then take supportive action. Your body is an extension of the subconscious mind. So back to those points. So if you really want to know what your mind, where your mind is at, talk to your body. It will show you where your subconscious mind is at, and it's showing up in your HRV. That's all I'm saying.
That's extremely profound and insightful. I'm a big fan of the N of one experiment, simply because that's all I'm in charge of. And I've had this ongoing debate with all the PhDs in my life. And for some reason, I seem to attract a plethora of those folks. And they start giving me the citation research and the double-blind studies and all that. And I'm like, okay, have we done a genetics on these people? What were they doing in their life? Like, there's so many variables that aren't counted in the double-blind study that I go, it's just a blind study on my body. Like I get like really freaked out. Like I can't tell how many people I would see obvious out of alignment with what they're advocating just by their presence and their consciousness. Like health practitioners, how many health practitioners, like if you look at medical doctors, their life expectancy is way lower than the population. Okay, so like, wait a second. Like, am I going to go to a plumber that doesn't know how to plumb it? Like, if I go to his house and the pipes are leaking, I probably shouldn't hire that plumber. I'm not going to go to an electrician to get my car fixed. And in the world that we see today presented, and it's really going to go nut bar with AI, is we see the artificial generation of reality.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's a very close approximation to reality, but it's not.
I wonder how our nervous systems are going to react to this, though. Like, I really wonder.
Correct. So that's my next question.
Yeah.
I'm setting up my next question. So my next question, we have this variance that's not been accountable in double-blind studies. We have the experts on health and vitality who are obviously dysregulated to the point their life expectancy is much less than the patients that they're treating. And some of the medications that are being advocated and stuff are not really in alignment. You have really smart people committed to a big goal with big debts that have to fall within a very limited range of toolboxes and now suffer the consequences of board regulated, certified this and regulatory bodies, a capture of the tyrannical administrations who are operating on their own agendas, not within the framework of the individual. But what you're talking here is the individual taking back, moving away from all of those components where the likelihood of them successfully figuring your individual's things out is very low, and saying, no, I'm going to take this back into this HRV model and I'm going to go down this process in order to determine what's best for me, because you do have some people that are more aggressive and natural and very physically.
Yes.
And if they don't have that, they don't feel right. And then you have other people who are like super soft and passive, and if too much stress is not that good. And does HRV help the person regulate their unique expression as a human, however they are, without saying, I've got to meet some externalized objective?
100%. HRV isn't going to tell you what to do. It's going to tell you how what you're doing is working for you.
Right.
So it's not, it's just, again, it's just the isness. It's what is. Whatever is going on, let's say you're holding everything pretty much in your life pretty constant, but you want to run this experiment. Let's say you want to go carnivore. You want to run the carnivore experiment, on your own body and see how it affects things. Cool. Run that experiment. Look at your own data. We're going to be able to see, how it's affecting your nervous system and your capacity to handle challenge and demand. If you aren't, if you're somebody that it's not going to work well with, you're going to see it, in data. For example, there's so many, we call them source labs. Like there's so many source labs we could do with you, Wade. I mean, you have so many different protocols and things that we could do, and just let's do it. Let's run the data. And that's what we want all health, professionals to feel free to do, is pair objective data with what you're doing and see kind of how your protocol, is affecting the groups that you are targeting, and yeah, there's just so much to learn. There's so much to learn. People wouldn't have thought that like doing a 5-minute cold plunge, 3 times a week might affect things. And then I think in certain people, you'll see it affects them greatly. Other people, you might see that it doesn't affect them as much. Why?
Mm-hmm. What is the typical client that comes to you? Why do people seek you out in the HRV world? Like what if you were to do the average profile of someone that is coming in, what are they coming in for? And what is the discovery after they start using HRV as a modulator or like a data point for how their life is working?
We have worked with so many different populations at this point. When we first started, remember I said I drained my 401k. I was just working with people more one-on-one with my business partner, Christy, and we were just doing transformational, like pretty straightforward food, fitness, and mindfulness trainings. And it was here in Venice, and we were doing them on the beach, and it was like super hyper local kind of vibe. Then we started to sell on Facebook. And then one of those users was the head of HR at Activision Blizzard. And when we got to that point, I was like, hot damn, we're sitting on all of this data where we can start to visualize the nervous system of this organization. We made a significant pivot at that point, and then we started to work with some, bigger companies, including Mars and Danone. So it is varied widely in terms of the individual users. And now we're working with coaches, consultants, health professionals that are using the platform to scale all of their interventions. So we don't have just like one type of person. All I can tell you is around HRV, the market, when I first got started, there were 2 apps in the App Store. One was in Japanese and one was in English. Now there are hundreds, if not thousands. And thank God, I would say the barrier to entry is lowering, and every single person that is passionate about health needs to be taking their HRV every single day. We're gonna, be launching a lot of consumer, hopefully direct to consumer products though. In the not so near future, we're doing what's called a Regenerate mentorship coming up, where people can use HRV to energetically align with themselves, their relationships, and the work they're doing in the world. Because again, at any point of this expression, my relationship to self, others, or my work, if it isn't in alignment, it's going to cause friction. So how can we pull in these life-affirming principles through everything that we do so that burnout is, a thing of the past?
That's exciting, because I think if you look at the data, burnout's at record levels. People feel less secure, less stressed, less connected, despite despite being, I always say that we were the most connected, disconnected world that's ever existed.
I know.
So the promise of the digital connectivity and all the advantages that brings has also brought with it a certain sense of stress and burnout that's happening, or existential crisis for all sorts of people. How does this impact companies per se? So I run a company. I'm always looking at, well, how do we modulate and figure out how all the we have people in 29 countries. How do I mitigate all of the variants that they're subjected to that I can't possibly follow on a day-to-day basis using HRV? And do you have examples of that? And what is the general result on the external performance side, as well as the subjective, how they're feeling about a company?
Yeah. So when you are living, I would say when you learn the basic principles of how to time efforts with more precision, meaning if you have a push day, we're going to really lean in. We're going to choose one area of life where we're going to really stretch today. Okay. On a maintain day, you're riding at baseline. The efforts are going to be more moderate. On a recover day, when you're below your baseline, super important that you are shoring yourselves up with a little more self-care. And that could look just like, a bath, extra meditation, extra breath work. It could look like a lot of things, but you're learning how to you're conceiving of your body like an energetic stock market, where there's certain days to save, certain days to invest, know what to do when we can get this portfolio to rise. So when people learn these basic principles, we can see baseline rising by at least 10, 15% over the course of 6 months. Now,
what does that mean to people to
that is
increase
a direct objective equivalent to increasing capacity to handle challenge and demand. From a business perspective, that equals reduction in absenteeism, reduction in healthcare costs, reduction in attrition. When we can shore people up energetically, all of those, I think it's like $1 trillion issue. It affects the global economy in a significant way. So when we can increase baseline, we're saving organizations a ton of money on those buckets. Here's the rub. And here's where we also have to start having more direct conversations, is the environments that people are in really matter. You cannot just give your employees, source and say, good luck. Because the greater environment that these people are in is also imprinting upon their nervous system. And so there's like a game within a game here that we're playing, which is, how do you not just regenerate your own energy, but how can we start to be on the regenerative journey in regards to building business? What does that look like? How can we start to redefine value in a way that we're spreading it across all shareholders, not just a return to the board? How can we start to do that? Because that will reduce a lot of this friction, because the traditional business model is highly extractive in regards to people and planet. So then there's that next level of the burnout conversation that has to be had.
When you're talking about this, so let's say the integration of that within the executive decision-making process is embraced in a company, let's say, per se. How long does it take, say, the executive team who's setting these benchmarks, directions, goals, and objectives? What's a reasonable amount of time? So a reasonable time for an individual, reasonable time for a vision team, and a reasonable time for an organization to transform, maybe. Because if you're in that space, it's always going to change. Maybe that changes deadlines. Maybe that changes obstacles. Maybe that changes.
It changes strategic planning quite a bit. When you're strategic planning around the energetics of your business, it changes things, but it makes it so much more efficient.
So how does that look? Because what we're trying to do is we've identified. So I'm going to recap a little bit for our listeners. We've outlined in this conversation, first, there is a collective societal component of being out of alignment with the efficiencies of the modern world. And there's a consequence and a cost. That consequence and a cost leads to a burnout. The burnout happens because we don't have a regulatory monitor to see where I'm at relative not to where everybody else is. Where am I at? How am I showing up? In my alignment? In my goals? And then we have these, and once you've established that, now that, okay, we have a model or a mechanism of observing where we are, now we have to systematically address both the internal self, the environment that I'm in, the external goals that I'm subjecting myself into my place as a human. And so we're moving into this stage of, okay, let's say we embrace that. I embrace this as a person. My executive team embraces the person. Our team embraces that as a person. How is that model going to shape culture in the future? And how does that align with maybe Source's mission?
Yeah. I mean, these are such big questions. I'm going to do my best to answer. Okay.
I like big questions.
Individually, your nervous system, it depends on how fried your nervous system is. So
Right.
if you were like me and you were really, really, really depleted, you really have to prepare yourself for just a bit of a gentler progression. Let me put it that way.
Yep.
You have to move slow, which again is going to really rub up against a lot of the grind culture conditioning.
Yes.
It's like the sacred opportunity, but also really puts you to the test because you can't push yourself to resolve burnout.
Yeah, that's funny. But I got to get rid of this burnout as fast as possible.
So it's so wild, like the level of surrender you have to practice when healing yourself from burnout.
How long did it take you? How long did it take you?
Oh gosh. So I started to see effects within the first few months. A full total rebound, probably 2 years. Because your adrenals, those are slow to rebound sometimes. So you just got to be really patient.
What was your life like at the 2 years from burnout to what was going on then? How did that influence your decision-making process and how you viewed the world and self and all that stuff? What was that like? Because
Well, at 2 years, I started the company. So that's
okay.
Which isn't, I would say, the soundest thing to do to start a high risk startup after, but that's why it's taken, I've really listened. The deep prayer was, let this happen at a rate that I can actually keep up with and maintain my health. And I really have found that the universe has listened to that because it's gone pretty just methodical and slow. It's just step by step. And, building the business is as much of a spiritual practice as my spiritual practice.
My business partner has coined the term "business is a spiritual path."
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it feels like.
If you're really going to grow through all of the challenges of a business, you have to evolve personally. And I think one of the disservices that I've noticed in the propaganda machines around businesses, certainly in movies and things, is that everybody that runs big companies is a psychopath, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen a benevolent representation of any executive person in any kind of movie or film or show?
Yeah,
I haven't.
Yeah.
So there's a cultural programming that comes with that. There's a rationalization of grind culture.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
there's no place where that's more prominent than, say, San Francisco. And look what's happened to the city in the last 20 or 30 years. One of the great cities of the United States has eroded into a cesspool, essentially, of what's gone wrong. And that's not to say there hasn't been a few mega successes that people that, fought through all that and went through that whole startup intensity culture. And then, but if you look at the city, what was the cost of that to society there? Seems pretty significant. And you see that being farmed out to other places.
Totally.
And I really, on a grand scale, and part of our Bioptimizers mission is to end physical suffering and activate biologically optimized health for everyone on this earth. Yeah. And that means the bioptimization, which is different than biohacking. And I want to coin this. Biohacking to me is, I'm going to take a shortcut to get a result without over the consequences of it. Biological optimization is allowing everything within your body to flow with optimal quantities in quantities so that they work in a symphony of perfect harmony. And one can, enjoy the bass as well as the strings or the horns. And as you progress through life, you get all of the notes and harmony. And if you have disharmony, nothing sounds worse than an orchestra playing poorly. Nothing is more painful than being in a body that doesn't work right, or a psychology or an environment that's not. And if there is that disharmony, then we see disease, distortion. conflict. And our messaging around that, and thank you for taking the time, our messaging around what it means to be successful and is got to change, both as a company, as an organization, and as individuals. That 2-year journey, and then this new version that now you're in, this startup. How many other people have shared similar stories in your range of experience? Because I don't want to just say, like, is this a common element that people show up, something's not working, I need to start testing stuff. They start doing the HRV, they go through a piece of discovery, and then they get comfortable with it and they learn about themselves. And then that becomes a more informed decision-making process. And ideally, the promise would be, hey, my life is actually a lot better and I'm actually producing more on the collective scale, or more in alignment with myself. And then if everybody's in that place, boy, this is a pretty harmonic life we would be living, wouldn't it?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest opportunity with using something like a source or HRV is, again, to reconnect to the wisdom that's available to you. It's yours, not someone else's. We're not going to always outsource our information. You're going to insource your information by using something like HRV, because you are unique. You are I would say, in need of maybe something that is nuanced. And if you don't start trusting kind of yourself on that path of discovery, I think you're going to be taking a much longer road. If you start to run experiments, don't jump to conclusions, just run the experiment. Just see like how your physiology responds, to what you're putting in it and what you're surrounding it with. All these things matter. And there's so many facets that have influence upon you. And instead of trying to race to get to the end and win it, enjoy how your life is opening up, and the next exploration, the next experiment that you get to run that will be life enhancing. There is a perspective shift that needs to take place in order for the urgency to come down and for you to really feel free to be on the adventure of it all. Because the old paradigm really wires people to think and win or lose rather than explore and experience, And so that would be my biggest encouragement for people, is to understand that you are a unique creature and you might have some unique needs. When you're using HRV, you're going to be able to see with a little bit more assurance kind of what is truly beneficial for you and what might not be, That's what I would encourage people to do. And to get back to your other question, though, around organization and organizational change, this is, I would say, we're at the tip of the iceberg with this stuff in regards to breathing HRV as a kind of core technology to manage human capital. It is brand new, and we don't know in terms of adoption rates, like how quickly all this can happen. But we do know, again, the simple act of a team lead being able to see when their team is on a downtrend and to simply pause and ask, hey guys, I see that we're on a recover day. Anybody want to share where the load might be coming from? That act alone, that simple act of inquiry, really helps to stabilize the collective. And when you know how to ask the right questions at the right time, it helps to stabilize the unit. So those are the kinds of things that we're experimenting with now inside of organizations. And we're getting some really, really promising early feedback.
I love it. It's really exciting. We have a check-in process that's subjective, but being able to put some objectivity.
I'll show you some data after our call, Wade, and you can see, what it looks like.
Okay, so a lot of my listeners are going to be excited. They want to know more about this. So I want you to shamelessly tell us why we need Source. How do we get it? What does it do? Why we should have that? Because I'm all about advocating a new paradigm of observational awareness for people. And I love your concept of energetic intelligence. And I think this could be a very, very big value in that you've obviously put a lot of time, effort, and energy into working this. So tell me how Source works, how people can access it, where they can get it, all the whole 9 yards, what the promise, what the delivery, what the expense, all of it. Tell us all. Give us the whole.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the song and dance.
Yes. Woo.
So for anybody out there that's been following Wade, that's building your business with his counsel, I would say Source is going to help you prove your impact. And so in the past, maybe you have known that your approach is working, but you haven't had those objective proof points. We can give you a platform that can be introduced into your entire client base. And in 1 minute a day, your clients will be able to see how working with you is truly impacting their nervous system. And so it's going to allow you to have science-backed innovation at scale. So if you have, 50 people or 50,000, we can scale far and wide quickly. And you can now have these, I would say, data-rich case studies that will only help you sell with a lot more consistency and assurance. In addition, what Source kind of is, if I can click you into it, it's like Kajabi and Oura Ring had a baby and then ditched the hardware. So if you have content, if you're like a content-driven coach, consultant, health professional, we can house all of that content. And then after they take their HRV score, they can receive just a snack size audio tip from you so that they almost have like a companion tool in between sessions with you or touches with you that can keep them consistent, motivated, and accountable so that you won't be taxed for your time. So there's a lot of different aspects in which we can help health professionals build their business. Of course, if you are a leader inside of an organization and you want to start to track the nervous system of culture with the goal of avoiding burnout, Source can deploy what's called an energy audit. And inside the energy audit, we'll be able to be able to have these deep insights into organizational vitality in a way that you've never seen before. So that would be that.
That would be my first step. I'd like to do that. Integrate that across the company because I think that's such a salient point because it's so hard to tell subjectively.
Yeah.
What's objectively the subjective experience of people. And you do that, but it's never, however that person showed up that day could be impacting their reporting, for example.
Yes. Subjective is good. It's not great. And
it's not great because you don't know that person has no, assuming they're not energetically literate in today's world, very few people are. We have to assume that because you're talking about energetic literacy,
right?
The own self, being able to interpret your own energy levels in an objective fashion. And then from there, let's start running some experiments. Let's start testing things in your own life, which everybody's free to do that and get excited and curious about the things that are influencing your life.
Yes. The energetic literacy, the ability to sense and respond into yourself, others, and the environments that you occupy. For some people, this might feel quite natural, but for the majority of people, they don't have a sense of their interior. They have been, again, disconnected from that information. That is a skill called interoception. The ability to sense and language what it is that you're feeling. It's a thing. And many people just haven't been nurtured in it. And so they are saying what they think they need to say in order to succeed or progress, but it isn't accurate. And so HRV is going to get us to, again, the heart of the matter.
So tell us, where do we get Source? How do we find it?
You go to source.io. You can email me, Jessica@source.io. And would love to talk to anyone and everyone.
Wonderful. Now, do you have a Instagram, social media, anything like that the company has? Or
yes.
Find out more.
Source.io. We have that across the board.
Okay.
And I personally am at I am Jessica Corbin on Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much for this interview. When I do neurofeedback training, was the first time I got introduced essentially to HRV practice. And subconsciously, psychologically, I would say there was a certain amount of resistance when I was exposed to it. And I felt that internal resistance. And I interpret that as, okay, I know there's suboptimal things in my life that are influencing how I'm feeling, and I don't want to investigate those because I feel like I'm going to give up something to if I go down that route. I'm not sure what the correlative consequences are going to be. Do you have any words for people who might be hesitant in that like, oh God, I know I'm stressed and my partner is this and my work is this and my kids are this and if I do this, I don't know what the consequences will be. Could you speak a little bit to alleviating maybe that anxiety to play around with it?
Again, such a good question. Resistance is such an invitation to pause. It takes incredible strength to acknowledge that it's present. And if you can just understand that there's more freedom on the other side of that resistance, maybe that will allow you kind of just that spaciousness just to lean in a little bit. You don't have to change anything until you're ready. Just because you're aware of something doesn't mean that you got to take action just yet. In fact, for your nervous system, it's best if you go pretty slow, be a bit methodical about it. But if you do fancy yourself as being someone that really values truth, your resistance is it's such a potent threshold to allow yourself to occupy because there's something there. And to me, it's like you're hot on the trail. Anytime that you get up against that resistance, it isn't bad news. You're like hot on the trail that's going to lead you to your freedom. And what I've found about the inner work is that a lot of times what is required is actually something like an internal perspective shift, not even like an external change of habit. It's like a frame. I need to just hold this exact experience in a slightly different way. So the resistance will come, and underneath the resistance a lot of times is like a need. Or I should say first, there's probably like a misunderstanding, a judgment. And then underneath that is like a need. And if we can just get to the need, like, what is it that I need, to know in order to relax into this? It's actually, the mind wants to make up a story that my whole life is going to have to change. I'm going to have to change everything. I'm going to have to move out of the country. I'm going to have to break up with this person, like all these things. And it's like, oh, or not. And to the degree that you can just allow yourself to get to know yourself and what's true and know that no action needs to be taken right away. I don't know. Those are the ways in which I have found helps to dissolve the intensity a bit.
The consequence of a suboptimal energetic state lead to burnout, disease, dysfunction, and dissatisfaction. That is within all the psychological literature. It's within all the biological literature. It is preeminent in today's world. And you've provided an observational, quantitative piece for people to recognize the scope of where someone is on that and begin to start to monitor and recalibrate back to something more alignment. So that's a great service to society.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that with our listeners. And thank you for being on the podcast today. And for everyone else who is listening, if you like this podcast, share it and consider dropping onto source.io and getting access to this HRV technology, this crazy thing about energetic intelligence, literacy. Understand that you are a unique organism worth the time of investigation. So if you are feeling stressed in your life, if you're feeling burnout, you have to realize this is a flashing red light in your life telling you to do something. It's not an accident that you're here. Stop what you're doing right now. Go to the website, learn more, get the HRV observational points here from Source, and see what happens. Go on the adventure of your life. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jessica. I really appreciate having you here. And I appreciate all of our listeners around the world. Hopefully this was helpful for you. I'm going to participate in this because I'm very curious as to what the results might be, both within my own life and as well within the lives of the people I love, trust, and rely upon, and hope that they are operating in their best self. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode. I'm Wade Lightheart from Bioptimizers. This is the Awesome Health Podcast.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.